Thanks, Sudeshna. Hi, everybody. My name's Rachel Olech, as Sudeshna said. I'm talking today on the top 10 reasons for modifications from the IRB. I'm going to start with a few disclosures. Just want to say that I have no financial or other conflicts of interest to disclose. So I named the talk the top 10, but top 10 is really a construct. It's meant to give a framework for this talk. Doesn't actually represent a formal assessment or ranking. For those of you of a certain age, you might remember David Letterman's top 10 talk. So that's where the name comes from. The content of this presentation was obtained from several sources. These include my personal experience, including past employment with OPRS, or the Office for the Protection of Research Subjects, current experience with IRB submissions. I also provide regulatory support within the CCTS, so I pulled from there, as well as discussions with colleagues from CCTS. On this point, I want to specifically thank Alison Santiago and Ibrahim Ugantade for their feedback that they've given me throughout the years. Another source that I pulled from was conversations with research staff on campus here at UIC. And also, and importantly, conversations that I've had with OPRS staff in preparation for this conversation. I did get current feedback. I've given this talk, this is now my third time. So the last time I gave it was back in 2023. But I did get in touch with OPRS staff and to make the presentation more current. However, I do not speak as a representative from OPRS. The thoughts and content of this are strictly my own. Oh, sorry. And I did want to thank an OPRS, specifically Chuck Heaney and Teresa Johnston, who gave me a lot of good feedback on this presentation. Okay, so why is this topic important? So my main goal of this talk is to demystify the IRB review process for people who are responsible for doing the IRB submissions on campus. Submitting to the IRB can be an overwhelming process for researchers. I'm pretty sure I'm speaking to the choir here. It's also common for there to be comments and revisions or requests for information that result from an IRB review. Knowing what the IRB is looking for and some common issues that are raised during the review can help researchers when they're doing preparation work for their upcoming IRB submission. What I will be covering in addition to those top 10 reasons for modifications, at the end of this talk, I'll be given some general tips on the IRB submission process as well. All right. I should also say, too, if you have comments or questions during the course of this talk, you can either pop in and say them or put them in chat. But I will ask a favor of Lori or Sudeshna if you could keep an eye on chat because I'm not sure I'll be able to keep up with that and also give the talk. Otherwise, it can just wait until the end. Okay, I'm going to start with an overview of OPRS and the IRB review process. So OPRS, or the Office for the Protection of Research Subjects, and IRB, or Institutional Review Boards, they both evaluate research on human subjects that are conducted at UIC or being done by UIC investigators to ensure that there is ethical conduct of the research, to ensure that participants' rights and welfare are protected while they're on the research project, and also that the research is compliant with federal and state regulations as well as university requirements. So the IRB evaluates or conducts a review of the project before it begins, and it requires changes in the research where necessary. OPRS is a component of the Human Research Protections programs here at UIC, and they're the ones that support the operations of the IRB. The review process is based on information that's provided to the IRB or OPRS. So this is information provided in documents in writing. Investigators initiate a review process by uploading documents into UIC Research and then completing a smart form. The IRB and OPRS often ask questions or request additional information and documents during the course of their review. So what do we talk about when I say modification? So within the context of IRB submissions, a modification can mean one of two things, but basically it refers to a change in the study. So a modification can either be initiated by the principal investigator or a member of the research team, and this type of modification used to be referred to as an amendment. The second type is a modification that's initiated by OPRS or the IRB as a result of the review of submitted materials. So these are commonly comments, questions, or revisions that are needed or requested that need to be addressed by the investigator or the research team. So it's this latter type of modification that I'm going to be focusing on within this talk. I do want to point out that this latter type of modification, the one that's initiated by OPRS or IRB, there are two other similar types of requests for changes or revisions or clarifications that can come out of the IRB or the OPRS office. And these are deferrals and clarifications. So a lot of the points that I'm going to be bringing up in this presentation also apply to deferrals or clarifications. So a deferral means a type of request for information that only applies in specific situations where a submission is reviewed by the convened or the full IRB, and there are significant questions about the research. So these are questions and concerns about a full board review question that those need to go back to that full or convened IRB. And the second type, a clarification, is a request for information or documents that comes from OPRS staff, and this is used to support a formal upcoming review. Okay, so these are the 10 topics that I'll be covering in this presentation, the top 10, quote unquote, top 10 reasons for modifications. They include protocol document issues, UIC supplement protocol issues, editorial issues with the consent, disclosure issues with the consent, investigator training, insufficient data security plan, recruitment plan issues, document discrepancies, missing or incomplete documents, and finally, prior issues that were not previously addressed. Okay, I'm going to start with protocol document issues. So this list describes the common document issues that are found after review, including using the incorrect protocol template, failure to follow template instructions, deleting relevant sections from the protocol template, failure to delete template instructions from that final document that's submitted to the IRB, insufficient detail on the study plan, and lack of justification for novel aspects of the study. Another type of protocol issues are questions, concerns, or revisions needed for the UIC supplement protocol. So just as a reminder, or for those who don't know, a supplement protocol is used when there's a protocol that's provided by a sponsor or study site, maybe it's from pharma. And the supplement protocol provides details of the project specific to UIC. So it'll explain things about the conduct of the research that only apply to UIC. Things like maybe recruitment or the data security plan. So some of the things that come up when there is a supplement protocol or one is needed would be a failure to provide a UIC supplement protocol when it's applicable to the project. It could also mean missing relevant information or insufficient detail on the UIC research activities, or again, failure to delete the template instructions. Now, with regard to both the first 2 points that I brought up about the protocol, there are ways to address these protocol issues proactively, so in preparation for your submission to the IRB. A big one, although relatively vague, would be to start planning the research project before you start actually writing the protocol. It's a good idea to have um, an idea of how you're going to conduct the research before you begin the writing process, because the research plan needs to be in its finalized form before you submit to the IRB. Use the current protocol templates, and these are accessed in the UIC Research Library. Also, links to the protocol and consent templates are available on the OPRS website, and I've included the link. So that's something that's relatively-ish new, that it used to be you had to go to UIC Research, log in, find the library, then find the templates. But OPRS has updated their website, so now you can go directly there. And some of them you can just click in the, you'll get the document directly. And for at least one of them, it'll take you to where you have to log into UIC Research, but it'll at least take you directly to the templates. Another thing you can do is seek advice if you're unsure about which protocol template to use. And as a rule of thumb, the protocol template needs to match the IRB selected on question 8 of the SMART form in UIC Research. The question of which IRB should oversee this study. In general, applications that are submitted for review to IRB 1, so social behavioral, health sciences and health and biomedical sciences, should use the protocol template health and biomedical research. So that's HRP-503. If you're submitting to IRB 2, then you'll be using the social behavioral and educational sciences template, and applications for exempt or determinations need to use the combined determination exempt template. Okay, another way to address issues proactively, and you're going to see this theme popping up over and over in my slides, is to proofread the protocol to ensure the study plan is complete, all research procedures are detailed and consistent. And I generally recommend, as a rule of thumb, when there is a question about how much detail to provide in the research protocol, is to write it as if you'll be passing on this protocol to somebody else unrelated to your project, and they're going to hopefully be able to repeat your experiment, given that document provided. And then just a note, and it probably doesn't apply to a lot of people, but if you have something that's novel, like a novel study design or something kind of that's newer, that might be unfamiliar to the IRB, it's good to provide additional details about these novel aspects. Sometimes people will upload articles, say, or just some other documentation to kind of head off any questions that may come up about that novel aspect of the research. Okay, next we have read and follow the protocol template instructions, but also remember you have to delete those instructions from the document before you submit to the IRB. Again, that's another common theme that you're going to see in this presentation. Okay, moving on to consent. And we had two areas to cover under consent. So this first one is editorial issues. These fall commonly in spelling and grammar errors, or you've written it where the text is too complicated or technical, above the reading level that you're going to expect from your research participants. In general, the IRB recommends a 6th to 8th grade reading level. I'm going to hold off for just a minute. Apologies. I'm getting my second cold of the year, so this is, I might have to cough. Other issues are not using the appropriate OPRS consent template, not following the instructions, or not deleting the consent and template instructions before you submit to the IRB. Okay, a second set of consent issues are disclosure issues, and these could fall under several categories. Apologies. It could be that study risks weren't fully disclosed in the consent document. It could be that the description of the study procedures weren't fully disclosed, either by missing information about those study procedures or not distinguishing between standard of care procedures and research activities. It could be that other text is missing from the consent document. This could include the required elements of consent as explained or outlined in the federal regulations. It could be missing disclosures that are required by the university, or it could be additional text as applicable to the research. So some examples might be biobanking or data repository information, optional research components if that applies to your research, HIPAA text that's there when it doesn't need to be. Could be missing information about genetic testing, or if you have a certificate of confidentiality, then that language is missing from the consent. And then finally, and it's not technically a disclosure issue, but it's an issue with the consent, where the consent document is written as if the potential subject has already agreed to participate in the study. So if you say something like, "Thank you for agreeing to participate in the research study," which would not apply because consent happens, this document and process starts before a person is given consent. Okay, so there are ways to address both the editorial and disclosure issues about the consent in a proactive way. So the editorial issues are pretty straightforward. Proofreading is one of the biggest ones. You could also have somebody like a layperson or somebody who kind of fits the definition of the people that you want to enroll in the subject. You could have that person read and provide comment on the readability of the consent. You can use dictionaries that define medical terms and scientific terms into lay language, so lay language dictionaries are helpful. You can also use software that will evaluate the reading level of consent. There are ways to address the disclosure issues as well. You can start by not minimizing things about the research that might be unpleasant or potentially harmful. You could carefully follow or you should carefully follow the consent template format and instructions. So for the consent, the same link that was provided in slide 9 also applies to consent templates as well. And then you can list and describe all research procedures and risks. Where applicable, explain how these are different from the standard treatment if you have like a health study. Excuse me. One moment. And just keep in mind that risks can be psychological. They can include the possibility of unknown risks. And there might be risks that might be not necessarily a risk to a general population, but might be apply and be specific to the population that's being recruited for your study. And there are also common errors that are seen with consent, such as claiming compensation as a benefit, not specifying whether a study drug is investigational, retaining HIPAA language when it's not needed, not including tax reporting requirements if participants will receive compensation, and inconsistency with the protocol. So you want to make sure that the consent doesn't say something that contradicts the protocol. Okay, a fifth issue is common issue is things that are related to investigator training. This could be that members of the research team don't have the OPR's required investigator training, or that training has lapsed. So Just note that all UIC investigators and key research personnel are required to complete the initial investigator training requirements and human subjects protections, and that's a CITI, Human Subjects Protections, or HSP, basic course. I think it's referred to as the stage, um, and before their involvement in research, and then 2 hours of continuing education every 3 years. So there's some ways you can address this. And these are things that I have to do pretty commonly when I do my IRB submissions. So researchers, first off, should use their UIC email address as their primary address when they're signing up in the city program. That will allow, once the training is complete, city will notify OPRS directly so that they could get those records updated seamlessly. You can have every study team member that's listed on the UIC research submission provide you with a copy of the training certificates to keep on file. I don't necessarily do this with everyone. Like if I've done it once for another study, I won't necessarily do it again. But I do like to make sure that people have completed their training. You don't have to upload those training certificates as a rule, unless it's requested by OPRS, but I do have a caveat below. But I always check the certificates to make sure that the correct training was completed and that it wasn't required. Wasn't expired. So the training requirement requires a basic or a stage 1 HSP course to be the initial investigator training. So that meets the initial investigator requirements, and the refresher or stage 2 plus HSP course for the continuing ed. So a common thing for somebody new is to first complete that refresher course as opposed to the basic or basic course or stage 1 course. So that's one of the things I normally check. If you've got somebody who's new to UIC and might have completed that training or had completed that city training course, but from another institution, you can upload that certificate with the IRB submission, or you might get in touch with OPRS before you submit and provide them with that documentation, just to make sure that they'll then have it on file. If the person has taken a compatible city training course, then it's pretty common for OPRS to well, they'll check it to make sure that it meets OPRS's requirements. But that is allowable as long as they're consistent training. Now, when I'm talking about investigator training here, I do want to point out that this only applies to what the IRB and OPRS requires. But you, as a member of a research team or a researcher, might have other training requirements outside of this, and they could be required by other campus units, sponsors, or agencies. HIPAA training for the hospital is a common one. Good clinical practice training is another one. Okay. Okay, next I'll be covering issues with the data security plan. And this generally falls into two types. Either the proposed plan doesn't meet the minimum standards to secure the research data, or the data security plan is not well defined in the protocol. And there's several ways to address these data security issues proactively. Just remember to address all points from the data management and confidentiality section of the protocol template, which can help you help to ensure that the required information is provided. You can consult with campus resources when crafting a data security plan, and these might include UIC Technology Solutions, so they have a website with all sorts of information on it. You might want to consult with your departmental resources or go to the UIC library as well. And UIC library has a lot of great resources when you're talking about a data security plan. Another important thing to consider is familiarizing yourself with some of the terminology that the IRB uses when you're talking about a data security plan. Specifically, the terms, excuse me, de-identified, identifiable, coded, and limited data sets. But I will give a short definition here. So when we're talking, or when the IRB and OPRS talks about identifiable data, they mean that the data set includes information that will identify a participant, either directly by using information such as names or medical record numbers, facial images. It could also be an indirectly identifiable by including information such as addresses, dates of birth, dates of service, or phone numbers. So there are 18 types of identifiers that are defined in the HIPAA regulations, and usually that's what they default to. When we're talking about de-identified or anonymous data sets, these are ones that don't contain any identifiers, direct or indirect, and they in no way link back to, there would be no way to link that data back to the identity of the person whose data it is. When we're talking about coded data sets, these are data sets that have identifiers, and the researchers are collecting things like direct identifiers, usually because you have a longitudinal project, so you need to match different data collection points to the correct individual. In these cases, if it's a coded data set, those direct identifiers are separated from that main data set and they're stored separately, but there is a way to link the two together by using a code. So you assign a code to the person, and when you're completing your data collection, you're only using the code and not a person's name or other identifier. And then a last type of the last term I want to cover briefly is a limited data set. And this is a special category. It's defined in the HIPAA regulations, where you have a data set which you plan to share, which contains protected health information or PHI, but you only can include a limited type of identifiers. So most of those 18 identifiers listed in HIPAA cannot be included in a limited data set except for city, state, zip code, and elements of date. So it's important to use these terms consistently and as used by OPRS and the IRB when you submit to the IRB. So for example, if you have a statement in your protocol that says, we will de-identify data with a code, this is something that's likely to get a modification request from the IRB because a coded data set is not considered de-identified. Okay. So other ways that you might manage your data security issue proactively is to separate participant identifiers from the data set whenever possible using a coding system. So I already explained what is meant by coded. So if you do not need to maintain identifiers, don't. And if you do, the best way to do so is to not directly link them to your data set. Another important piece of information is about using portable electronic devices to store research data. If you are doing so, like you're using a laptop or maybe a thumb drive or some other way to store data portably, you either need to use encryption software or the data that is on a portable electronic device is de-identified. Okay. Another way, there's a lot of things under the data security plan. Another thing you can do is explain and justify plans for sharing data or retention of data beyond the proposed study aims. You should collect and store identifiable information security, and when applicable, so if you have a study that also needs to be HIPAA compliant, you need to use a HIPAA compliant platform when using protected health information. You should de-identify the data as soon as possible with your research. So if you have identifiable data, you're done with your data collection, it's a good plan to de-identify the data. And that way you can keep that de-identifiable data indefinitely or as outlined in your contract with the sponsor. Okay. Switching gears here to discuss issues with the recruitment plan or documents. Again, this is a very common thing with um, IRB submissions and IRB reviews. So modifications are commonly related to issues with the recruitment plan or document. A recruitment is considered part of the consent process, just as an FYI. The recruitment plan, so this is kind of explaining what we mean. The recruitment plan refers to the methods that are in place to advertise the research study and to identify, contact, and screen prospective research participants. Whereas research documents refer to the materials that are used during recruitment. So common recruitment documents include flyers, social media, advertisements, and recruitment scripts. Issues can include you have documents that don't fully disclose relevant information about the research or don't follow university or technology solutions requirements. Key documents such as scripts or flyers are missing from the IRB submission, or the recruitment plan doesn't meet adequate data security measures. And there's ways to address all of these proactively. Full disclosure of relevant information should be included in the protocol document. So there's that section on the recruitment plan, and should include describing how and where prospective participants will be identified, how they'll be approached, who will conduct the recruitment, and how they'll be trained. The protocol should include a step-by-step description of the recruitment process in detail. In addition, university and technology solution requirements should be followed, including the use of university email. So if you're using Gmail, as part of your research, but oftentimes with recruitment, you need to link this to university email. So this is a university requirement. And then you also need to notify the IRB that you've done so. And finally, personal phones shouldn't be used when interacting with participants. So if you have a contact phone number in, excuse me, as part of your recruitment plan, you're going to be advised to not use a personal phone. Okay, I've included a list here, but I am running short of time. These are items that need to be included in recruitment material as they're outlined according to OPRS guidance. So there's all sorts of keywords, do's and don'ts about information provided in recruitment documents. Everybody will have access to the slides, so I'm happy to share, and then you can take a look at these. Okay, so issues 8 and 9 are provided here. 8 is document discrepancies, and 9 is missing and incomplete documents. So discrepancies basically means you've got different information given in different documents. So you've got a protocol that says one thing and consent and recruitment that say another thing. Missing or incomplete documents. So there's some documents that are commonly not uploaded when you do your submission, including recruitment material, documentation, including approvals from non-UIC sites that are involved in the project, documentation from the FDA, things like IND approvals, drug information sheets. It could include surveys and questionnaires that are referenced in the protocol but not uploaded, and data collection forms if they're not incorporated into the protocol. Another thing that kind of falls into this category is the failure to create ancillary reviews as applicable to the research. So that is a process as part of your submission in UIC research. And ancillary reviews are the other committees or campus units that need to sign off on, approve, or give their okay to the research project that's outside of the UIC. So there's ways to address these proactively.
Rachel,
Yes, are we
can I
running
interrupt
short?
you?
Yeah.
There are a few questions in the chat, so if you want to answer them now or
Okay, I can't see them when I'm in presenter view, but if you want to start by asking me, then I can
Okay, so the
answer.
first one is from some time ago, and Tomoko is asking, aren't there two trainings that need to be done for the first time investigators? There's stage one and the security one, yes?
Oh, I think you're referring to the information privacy and security. It used to be a requirement for the IRB. It was called the IPS training. It is no longer required for the IRB, but um, there are other data security training that you probably have to take for the campus.
Okay. Larissa says, what methods should be used to call or text participants? Can Google Voice be used?
Oh, that's a question for technology solutions. So I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I know that there are university requirements about telephone and email use. And there are ways, at least for email, I know that there's a way to link your Gmail to a UIC account, but I would recommend checking with the technology solutions website and see if they have a guidance document on that.
Okay. There's another question. What's the whole name of OPRS?
Office for the Protection of Research Subjects.
And that is it for now.
Oh, okay. Okay, so back to these documents. There's ways to address the documents proactively. Okay, I think I started with some of these. One thing is that it's common during the course of preparing for an IRB submission, or if you need to make a change to documents, that you're editing and amending documents. And it's just helpful to make sure you apply them to all documents. That was a pretty common thing I remember seeing back when I was working in OPRS. Um, Follow directions on the templates, including both the protocol and the consent. Proofreading, again, I'm repeating myself from previous slides. Following directions, proofreading, and having somebody check your paperwork is always helpful. And as a point to the last one about having a knowledgeable person conduct a pre-submission review of your study materials, you could have a colleague do that, but just know that CCTS provides this as a service to researchers on campus. It's a free service. It's done through the regulatory knowledge and bioethics support team. And I included a link at the end, so I'll explain that later. Okay, and the last point to bring up is multiple requests for modifications. And this is when an investigator, like you have a submission, an initial review, or they've investigator initiated some changes, and the IRB comes back with multiple requests for modifications. So you get the modification letter, you respond, you get a request for more modifications. And these could be either like a failure to respond to certain items that are outlined in the IRB's letter or not following other types of instructions in the IRB's letters. So one thing you can do, used to be a requirement, I don't know if it still is, excuse me, is to use the cover letter, the letter that you got from the IRB. Take each point and then create your own cover letter with all of those points and then your response. Sorry. And then the second two ways, again, repeating, just proofreading and having a second person check your work. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to part two of my presentation. So again, the part one of this, where I talked about ways to improve the submission documents. Part two is going to cover other tips that are related to the IRB submission process. And we'll focus on some of the common errors that are seen during that submission process. And again, the reason I'm bringing this up or discussing this is it can help streamline the IRB review of individual projects, avoid submission errors, provide some information on using UIC research, the electronic submission platform that the IRB and OPRS uses. So kind of the correct usage of it. And again, to demystify the review process. And I know I'm getting a little bit short on time, so I'll try and work this all in. Okay. So we're going to start. I should backtrack. A lot of this information I got a lot of feedback and information from OPRS directly. So these are the things that they're seeing, and a lot of it they've asked me to communicate. Okay, starting with uploading documents into UIC Research. So again, UIC Research is that IRB submission platform. One common thing is that when uploading documents into research, that these documents were uploaded into the wrong section of the smart form. So within UIC Research, protocols, consents, and recruitment materials all have designated sections where they must be uploaded in order to be properly finalized and stamped. Only consents and recruitment materials get stamped. I do have a caveat, which is the CCTS Clinical Research Data Warehouse DRA form, so that data sharing form also requires an IRB stamp. Therefore, as of now, unless they get their own category in UIC Research, those documents are uploaded as a recruitment document so that it can get that stamp. Okay, so everything else, so everything outside of protocols, consents, and recruitment gets uploaded as other attachments. So these are things like the data collection form, survey instruments, interview guides, letter of support, or any other document type that doesn't fall under protocol, consent, or recruitment. Upload that as another attachment. So these are things that don't get an IRB stamp, but uploaded as the other attachment, they're acknowledged as part of the submission. Whenever possible, you should be submitting documents as Word documents for review, comparison, and stamping purposes as applicable. A modification request will be requested if they've been uploaded into the wrong section, even if they're otherwise approvable. It's because OPRS is not able to finalize them. So make sure you use the correct category of document. Another issue that came up or comes up is updating documents in UIC Research. And what we're talking about here is replacing an existing document versus adding a new document. So we'd use the add button, so add a new document, only when a version of that document hasn't been previously submitted. So for instance, if you have a new recruitment flyer, you would add and upload that in UIC Research by using that add button. However, you would use the update button when you're uploading a revised version of the document that's already in the system. For example, you already have that recruitment flyer, but you need to edit it, so you would do so by using the update feature. So if you have the revised document and it's being uploaded correctly in place of a previous document, you do not need to use a track changes copy. So a track changes is the feature like in Word where it'll do a comparison of two documents and create a new document that'll show the changes, the differences between the two. And for those of you who've been around a while and remember the old system, anytime you submitted an updated document, you needed to also include a track changes document, and that made the IRB submission process go quicker. But now, for a lot of documents, you don't need to do that, but you have to kind of upload them correctly. And it only applies to Word documents. So if you're uploading or updating a new document that you've already have in place and you want to make some edits, you don't need to include that track changes anymore for Word documents. You do, for any revisions, need to include an updated version number and date on these updated documents. These allow tracking and over the course of the study, the different versions. So it's a version control system. Also, when you're updating documents, remember to not delete the document that you want updated. So you leave that alone, you just update the new. If you have documents such as consent and recruitment that are no longer in use because you've got your study's close to enrollment, these can be inactivated at continuing review in UIC Research, so as part of the SMART form. Okay, now, okay, 15 minutes left. This slide is specific to when an investigator or research team needs to submit a modification, which were formerly known as amendments. Within UIC research, there are two types of modifications or amendments with different scopes. The first type is study team member updates, and this is used only for changes to study personnel. So if you need to make quick changes, you have a new research coordinator, you add them as a modification and click study team member update. The second type is other parts of the study, and this is for all other changes to the research. So you can combine both of these scopes if the modification involves both types of changes, and you do so by checking both boxes in the Smart Form when you're creating that modification submission. Some things to keep in mind, though, is only one submission for each scope can be in process at any given time. So, for example, if you have a modification for study team member in process, so submitted but not approved, you can't create another one if there's already one in there. That pending submission needs to be approved before the other of the same scope can be created. And also, a reminder was requested that you include the names of all of the individuals being added and removed as part of the submission summary. So when you're uploading that submission, creating that submission, there's a study summary section. And that's a good place to list, we are adding so-and-so and removing so-and-so as key research personnel or co-investigators for the study. When a modification needs to be made at the time of continuing review, you would use the modification and continuing review, so that's listed as a CR-mod option when you're creating the submission. And this will ensure that both that modification and the continuing review are reviewed together. So if you have a combined continuing review modification application, then both that continuing review and the mod must be approved by the IRB for either to be approved. There is something that has come up during the course of OPRS reviews that they asked me to communicate. And that's if you have a modification created before a continuing review submission, but that modification gets approved after the continuing review is approved, then the expiration date for the whole study within UIC research is going to revert back to the previous year when the modification approval was processed. And then that will cause the study to appear to be in a lapse state, even if the study was renewed. Therefore, until this gets fixed, it's highly recommended that you that any pending modifications are addressed and approved before you submit the new continuing review. And that additional changes that go with that continuing review just submitted at the same time. We're using the continuing review mod option. Okay. Other UIC research processes. So when you have continuing reviews and study closures, the study closure, so used to be called a final report, this process in UIC research follows the continuing review process. So it might be confusing like the first time you do it because you're trying to close it, not continue the study. But you do go to the continuing review process, and within the Smart Form, the first 4 boxes kind of that you checked for research milestones, if you checked all of them, it'll trigger a final closure, or sorry, a study closure in UIC research. If you're submitting either a continuing review or a study closure, just ensure you provide the continuing review status update form, if applicable, to explain any items that are not checked under check all the items that are true. So some notes about other review processes in UIC research. If you get a clarification, so that's a request for information or documents from a research team that's meant to support an IRB review. If you get one of those, you need to address them because IRB review can't proceed until that response is submitted. Also, if you have changes that are pending, either their IRB request modifications or OPRS request clarifications, um, these changes, any changes that need to be made in the smart form, including uploading document, are done through the edit study button before the response is submitted, the form gets locked again. Um, Okay, some other processing tips, version control. You need to make sure each document has a version number and a date. And also, when you're saving those documents, it's very helpful to also include the document name, version number, and date when you're uploading it. Um, I already went over the track changes, so I won't go over that part again. Okay, so basically, if there's one takeaway, um, or a takeaway, it's that if you need help with the IRB submission process or you have questions, the Center for Clinical and Translational Science, or CCTS, has a regulatory team, and we are here to help, and we are a free consultation service. So we help people navigate the IRB submission process. This group consists of myself, Rachel Olech, and my colleague, Allison Santiago. We are both senior regulatory specialists. We both have extensive experience with the IRB submission process. My particular area of expertise would be for the biomedical research side, FDA regulations and clinical trials, as well as projects that have vulnerable populations. Allison Santiago, her area of expertise is social behavioral and educational research, also vulnerable populations. She's also great with single IRB and external reliance agreements. I've included the CCTS website here. And if you're interested in a consultation, I've included the link here as well. So people will have access to these slides and you can catch it there. I've also included each of our individual emails. That's all I have for today. So if there are any questions, I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, wow, there's a lot.
Yes. I can I can say I can
That would
say
be
it.
great. Thanks.
Okay, so Heather asked, since track changes is no longer required, how detailed should we be with summarizing the changes so IRB can follow what was updated?
Oh, that's a really good question, and there's kind of an art to it. Um, so I'm pulling from my own experience here because I used to work in the OPRS. I used to get these. It's nice to kind of um, have a starting point to frame what type of changes are being made. So let's just say you're editing your consent. Anything that falls under we're doing editorial changes can just be editorial changes to the consent. But if you are updating, let's just say you have a study and you're adding a new blood draw to visit 3. You would in that summary, you would say overall, we are editing our project so that to include a blood draw at visit 3. And we have updated our protocol document and our consent or our recruitment accordingly. So a general description of the types of changes that are being requested is nice, but you don't have to get super detailed about exact wording changes. And again, when we're talking about personnel, I always used to find it very helpful to specifically name people added and removed. And with the way the smart form is now, it's if like you submit your changes to personnel, um, it's not always obvious um, without explaining, without including that context. So the summaries provide context for the IRB reviewer for what they should be looking for. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, the next one is, if it's a multiple sites research sponsored by company, they already have uniformed protocol, should still use UIC protocol template.
You use the UIC supplement protocol in that case. So if everybody's going to be using, like all study sites have a protocol to follow, um, that document generally won't include information that's also relevant for a UIC IRB review, things like how you're going to be recruiting people at UIC. So that's where you would use that UIC supplement protocol. So when you're submitting, you submit both. You submit the sponsor protocol, which gives most details about the research plan experiment, and then UIC site protocol, which gives UIC site specific information.
That's it, Rachel, in the chat.
Oh, okay. Great. If anybody has other questions, again, you have a link to, you'll have access to the slides, and that should be in tracks, correct? So go ahead, take a look, or look up CCTS. You can find my name or Allison's name, and feel free to contact us at any time. We can hopefully answer your question. Do all protocol amendments need justification? Oh, wait, did we do that one? I don't know if we have more questions.
It's a new question. It's a
Oh,
new question, Rachel.
yeah, I'm trying to find it. Do all protocol amendments need justification? For example, a minor one like adding a new questionnaire or change. Not necessarily, but justifications are helpful. Just explaining why you're making the change. So like adding a new questionnaire, does this reflect a new study aim that you're looking at? You might want to include that. I like to see justifications, except for really minor stuff. I'm sorry, I used to when I worked there. I don't do the reviews anymore. Okay, I think that is it. All right, great. Yeah, unfortunately, I came down with a cold this morning, my second cold of the year. Not ideal. So I thank you for putting up with me. Um,
There is one more question.
oh, are certain errors more common in certain types of research? For example, have you noticed common errors for clinical trials versus community-based participatory research and vice versa? Yeah, the answer is yes, but I wouldn't be able to generally categorize it. The research that's conducted on campus is like so varied. I worked on the IRB, IRB3, which is now IRB1, biomedical board. So I didn't see a lot of CBPR research. Um, but you bring up a good point, at least for the different types of research. If I was back on IRB1 or doing the biomedical research, the people on that board might not see certain types of research that might commonly be on social behavioral and educational research. So it is sometimes helpful if you're doing research that combines elements of both basic types of research, um, that you might be a little bit more careful in crafting the language, or keep in mind that you might get modifications simply because the IRB that's reviewing it maybe doesn't see that type of research design as common.
Okay, we are at time. Oh, there is another question.
Athletic clinical trials at UIC. Oh, compensation question. Oh, that's really complicated. I cannot answer that, but if you want to send me an email, I'm going to quickly put my email in here. You can send me an email, and hopefully I can send you some resources about that particular issue. Yes, you do have to pay tax, and there's a whole process. We did do a presentation on compensation, so maybe we can find that. We do have some resources available about that.
Okay, thank you, Rachel, and thank you everyone for attending today. The next best practice hour will be Tuesday, February 18th, 2025 from noon to 1, which will be on IND regulations. Please keep your eye out for emails regarding future sessions. We hope to see you next month. Thank you.